Oh, my name was given was Edgar Lloyd Van Lanningham, and they went to initials, EL, that I grew up with, 122729. Arkansas City, Kansas.
Tell me about the town you grew up in. What was it like?
Winfield.
What did people do?
Group of 10,000. It was a college town, 2 colleges in town. They loved music there, had a good music program at the school. 10,000 people, and they were very tribal, as they were in those days, and they competed with Arkansas City, where I was born. They hated each other, and we just fell in line and thought you're supposed to hate these people that are born 10 miles away from where as the crow flies. And that went on, unfortunately. It was a farm community, exceptional to have 2 colleges in town, and you had your businesses, which don't exist today. There were five jewelry stores in a town of 10,000. There were neighborhood grocery stores around. There were 43 stores like that when I grew up, including a lady next door who sold things out of her house. And Fanny Walker was her name. Fanny was religious, and she had a good practice that if we memorized a Bible verse, we'd get free candy. I forgot the Bible verses. Okay. My dad was a Prudential agent. He was in a lot of homes. He went by Van all the time. And he made some wonderful contacts with people. He was a caring man. My mom didn't work. She was an immigrant from Scotland. She came over when she was 11 years old, 1911. Her dad was a coal miner. He came over a year earlier to live with a brother to save enough money to bring her and 7 kids with her that she was fully responsible for. On their way to where my dad was born was a tall house, 2-story house with a huge circular porch on it. And the kids were in a wagon, the 7 kids, and they drove by this huge house. And this one lady, it was my aunt, who told me this story. We looked at that house and said, who in the world would have ever owned a house like that? And then my aunt would just go into laughter, because she said we didn't expect our oldest sister to marry the son who lived in that house. And that's what happened. He spent years on the farm. He had allergies. He had to go into business elsewhere and get away from the farm. But his dad, Dutch, was the guy who said, you ought to take a look at that Charlotte. And he did. And in the silo in that farm, I found it one day. I went out there looking for something, and here was Edgar plus Charlotte carved on the inside of that silo. Still there. And anyway, small town, coal mining town. When my uncle came over to meet his brother and worked there a year, they were in a house together. I don't know how many people lived in this house. Another favorite story. The first day that he went to work, after all the kids moved in, he was riding home and he told his brother, said, good grief, those kids have been there one day and they've broken every window in the house. They weren't broken, they had been cleaned for the first time. True story. Okay.
So your grandparents, were they nearby?
I mean, not when I was growing up, no. No, my dad had the tragedy of a fire wiping out his business. He had to relocate. They moved to Oklahoma. One brother, 8 years old. My sister was 10. She was a honor student type. She won spelling bees in the town of 10,000. My brother was not gifted with the brilliance that she had, but he went all through school knowing to be Jerry's brother and expected things from him, and he really didn't deliver. He kept me humble. She kept me warm and loved. I did all kinds of things. I can understand why he got so dang tired.
What did you like doing when you were a kid? Just when you had an evening to yourself?
Playing in other kids' houses and having them over to play games on the floor. I used to philosophically say, I wonder why the kid that I play with here, who has 10 kids in a smaller house, When we play, we're playing on linoleum. And if you know what that is, it's a hard surface. In my house, we played on a carpet, a rug. And I always wondered, why is that different? Why does that exist, you know? Aunts and uncles from Detroit that visited occasionally. And I loved that. I loved that. I always felt I was cheated.
So when you were a little kid, what did you want to do when you grew up?
That's a good question. Let me think. Besides be a good boy, you mean? Okay. That was taught in the home, you know, what you're supposed to do. I didn't thank God for it. I don't know, probably Buck Rogers, you know.
Oh, that's a good one.
See,
That's a good one.
I got to see the movies. when I
What
was a kid.
was your first job?
Co-op Grocery came to town. They built the largest grocery store in town, which meant 2 stores of 50 feet for 100-foot frontage.
And how old were you here?
I was 11 years old. My folks traded there. I went home one day and they said, Jap Cochran wants to visit with you about going to work. I was 11. Couldn't believe it. Went, saw him, and he said, yeah, I want to put you to work. We start at 7 in the morning and we work till 11 at night. We had an hour for lunch and 30 minutes for supper, and we'd finish up around 11 at night. I carried groceries. I did every job that some of the other older guys who were also seniors in high school, okay, a couple of basketball stars. They began my sex education there. That's the worst education I could have ever had. And I never heard a dirty joke. I only heard my dad say damn and hell one time, and it's when he had gone, as a prudential agent, had gone into the house, come back, and he was angry. He said, these damned attorneys don't know what the hell they're talking about when it comes to insurance. And I was just stunned. And then the next stop, I said to Mom, I said, I didn't know Dad would swear. Well, she said something to him. He came back later and apologized. He just didn't. He didn't. I took over his job after he'd been there 23 years and was disabled. And when I went to like the Ford dealer and insurance with the mechanics there, and one of them asked me that day, he said, are you going to bring a good story in here every week like your dad did? And I thought, bingo. He loved to tell the jokes too. After a year on that grocery job, I went to work for a guy named Red Grantham. Red was the community communicator. All the things that went on in town, he was the announcer. At the ball game, every night, Winfield, 5 nights a week, we had baseball going on. And Red would be the announcer. And Red could just elaborate and say, I just got the attendance figures tonight, it's over 2,000. And everybody just moan and groan because it was more like 200 to stretch it, you know. But they knew him and they accepted him for that. And he was outgoing, and that was probably one of the greatest blessings I had in my life.
And how old were you when you met Red?
I went to work with him 12 and worked for him until he sold out. I was 16 then, and learned the poultry business. Then you bought poultry from farmers. You had no commercial, and that's what you retailed, and you processed them. And I learned how to gut those chickens, but I got the job as an egg candler. But farmers would bring in eggs, and you would candle these eggs. I learned to do that at the grocery store. That helped get me this job. He had a son. One son they had adopted, and we hit it off. Also, he was a friend of my dad's, and probably that's why I got the job. But anyway, I think it was like having an extra father that knew everything that we were doing, we guys were doing. He always hired kids. We had boxing gloves on hand if they needed to take a break. Sometimes we'd be working our rear ends off and processing the chicken, and he said, we got to take a break. Well, we worked around water. You had water to, when you processed, the poultry, it was running water. So behind that was an old chicken pen wired in, where you'd put some of the extra chickens you wanted to turn them on the floor. And he'd just say, let's take a break, that's enough. And we would break maybe for 10 minutes. We could take pails of water out there. We could take soft-shelled eggs out there, which were saleable. They were edible, and we could fortify ourselves, and we could have a water fight, an egg fight, and we'd just go back in and work our rear ends off for that man. He knew what he was doing. I went to work when Prudential offered me my dad's job when he was disabled. They came and offered me his job. He spent 23 years at it. That was a major gift. Would you believe the first death claim as an agent was on my old boss, Red. And I went to I did have the manager with me. And I went to talk to his wife, Elizabeth, who was a dear, dear lady. And she says, E.L., I understand this is the first time you've ever had to do it. I said, yeah, it was tough. And I loved him. The town either loved him or hated him. He was a town promoter when they celebrated their 75th anniversary of the town. Red was made the chairman of the committee to celebrate it. And I once asked him, how could you end up with all these jobs? And he said, because they're the easiest in the world. All I got to do is tell what everybody should be doing and see if it gets done. That was my tutor. I remember from probably, I was moved to Winfield at age 2.5. I remember that house quite well. And I also remember I slept with my parents at that time because there wouldn't be enough beds. My dad had lost everything and he was starting over in that job. Toughest job in the world, selling life insurance in a depression. And anyway, I forgot the beginning of that question you asked about.
Just living through the Depression.
Oh yeah.
Very
I'll tell you
young.
what I remember. First of all, I always had food on the table. As I said, the house I lived in, compared to my playmates, was always nicer, a little nicer. Didn't make any difference. And I remember the people who came to the back door asking for food. These would be guys. They call them hobos, which is a terrible name, I think. My mom never turned down one. And I remember these guys sitting on the back steps that went down to the backyard, eating a plate of food that my mom had given. That's what I saw growing up.
Were you old enough to realize what that meant? And what your
Yes,
family's values
not to
were?
the fullest extent, because I was secure. I had a roof over my head. I had food every day, and wonderful parents, of care and nurturing. My brother kept me humble. He had good friends that were so nice to me, and that's my problem. I wanted to tag along with him, and I understand why he got so dang angry at me, because they would treat me so nice. Anyway, but I knew it was going on. When I worked in that co-op grocery, I remember people bringing purses in that were about this long. They'd fold, and you'd let it drop down, and there was a clip there. They'd clip that open. They'd look in there, and they would count out the pennies, and the nickels, and the pennies. That's what I saw the flow of money like. I also saw at that grocery store things that were thrown away in the produce, in the garbage, that I asked my boss, I said, "What are we throwing that away? We got people that could be eating that." And he said, "Yeah, you got to learn business, because if I gave it away, they wouldn't be buying anything, and so we've got to get rid of it." Well, we've cured some of that in this country, but that's what I was weaned on, that kind of education, and I knew it wasn't right.
Education, what did you enjoy in school?
And I know, besides recess, we had some plays. Loved acting in plays. Loved to play baseball. Never made the team, but always made the bench at least. And I had teachers that were extremely nice. And then I had one in the 6th grade that was Old Lady Jones, they said about her. And I was her errand boy, and also the guy that sat in the chair right in front of her. She watched my every move. She once said, "Yeah, you've got the worst one-track mind I've ever seen in my life." And she was somewhat right about that. when I get my mind on something. But I became her errand boy. I had a bicycle, and I loved it when she sent me out to go get something and so forth. I made it to a year and a half of college. Had to make a decision whether to continue college or take that Prudential job. And when I asked the business manager of the college, as a bookkeeper, what would I expect to earn when I got out, he thought of it and he said, oh, about $200 to $250 a month. And I said, Mr. Dumbler, if I don't make $5,000 a year, I won't keep the job. And I remember Mr. Dumbler looking at me, and I didn't ask him, but I bet that's more money than he made as a business manager of the school in 1952, probably. So I took that job, yeah. Oh, we had a great couple of drugstores, town restaurants. We all went to Bird's Drug, that had a big fountain in it, pharmacy. We had a jukebox in there. We didn't like they called him Pecky Bird, was his name. And Pecky Bird would not allow any dancing in there. So we did have another place that we went called Candyland, where they'd let you dance. And I think about Mr. Bird today, how did he make any money off those 5-cent drinks, for crying out loud? We had 3 movies in town, and my folks, I got the age where they would give me a dime on Saturday. And I had a decision to make. I could go to the big Regent Theater, see the better movie, it cost a dime. Or I could go to one of the other 2, pay a nickel to get in, and have a nickel for popcorn. So that was the decision. I really wasn't, the well-to-do grandpa was dead before I was born, and his mother died at age 39, so never knew her. Knew a stepmother of his slightly, but we were 500 miles away, and it was hard to get there, and you had to watch the expenditures. I went out for cheerleader in the 7th grade, and my brother had been a cheerleader, and so that's what inspired me to go. I lost that first one in the 7th grade, because the guy who won it, he had a brother that played on the basketball team.
So it was one guy, one position?
Oh, no, there were 4 in junior high. And the next year I won it, and the years following, then I won head cheerleader, yeah. And we got no training whatsoever. We just did what we made up. No backflips, no gymnastics or anything.
I bet that was fun, though.
It was until you had a losing team, and we had a terrible football team, terrible. And going out there and yelling, let's go get them, and keep applause going. It was a little hard to generate applause and yell, but anyway, made it. By the way, I'll add my sister, my honor student sister, was the principal secretary at the high school. I might have gotten a favor or 2 there along the way on that one, but she was good. She was the first one to graduate from college in the family on her own. Well, my brother had been in the Marine Corps, 4 campaigns, Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Saipan, and Tinian. And that's another story. We said goodbye to him June in 1942. We saw him at Christmas time in 1944. All those months we never saw him. There were no leaves. And by the way, in this place where I live, got a friend who was with my brother. They didn't know each other. Same campaigns. He's still living today, Al is. He's forgotten a lot. Anyway, I have to help him once in a while. I would say I was fortunate because I'd heard his boot camp stories. I knew what to expect, and there are a lot of them. Some of the nicest guys in the world. I had 2 buddies from Iowa that they were farm boys, and well, first of all, we were facing a draft or a decision to pick the service you wanted. And this recruiter came by and he signed up those 2 guys, and they didn't have a clue. I better cut the story short there, because I could talk about those guys and the experiences they had, and they were dear friends. Only to Japan for a 2-night stay, and then we hit Korea. And that was July of 1952. When the ship pulled in at Pusan, and now this isn't the days when, in the Korean War, we about got ourselves pushed off of Pusan. It was that bad. But it had changed, and we'd gained some country. But I just remember that we as Marines looked at those hills and we thought, oh my gosh, what are we in for? Because infantry hills mean a lot in what you have to do. They were steep as the dickens. We boarded, they took us to an air base, and we flew up just short of the line, front line. You had a complete line that was made of bunkers, foxholes. You established that line and you maintained that. 50% watch at night. You watch it during the day, but that's when you expected action to happen, it was at night. But when I remember I went up, joined the buddies you'd been with, now we're all scattered. So I went by myself to this company, met my group leader, my platoon leader, a great man. And he said, well, Van, I think I'm going to put you on an outpost. We got an outpost 500 yards out in front, and he pointed to it up on a hill off in the distance. And there was about 6 or 7 guys there at that time. He said, that's where I'm going to send you. And I thought, oh my aching back. I just got here, and that's the first exposure. Got up there, and nothing had been happening, and they were all lounging around. It's summertime. They were taking in the sun. And the one guy asked me, where are you from? And I said, Winfield, Kansas. And he jumped about 3 feet in the air from his back. He said, I'm from Wichita. And oh my gosh, of course we hit it off. And he was a dear friend. I think one of the struggles I had, that my letters will bear that out, is I went over there as a corporal. Okay, lucky me. They need so many corporals, I'm one of them. I get that handed to me. So I go over, and there are guys with PFCs, and there were some other corporals there. And we went immediately, after a week on that outpost, we went back into reserve for a whole month. Trained, lived in tents that would wash away and everything else. And the squad and the platoon leader called me in one day and said, I'm making you a squad leader, the 3rd Squad. And my heart sank. I thought, you got guys here that have seen action. They know more about it than I do.
So were you like, oh wow, or were you like, oh no?
Oh no, it was a no. I felt it was unfair to them. I thought you should have picked somebody else. He was a good platoon leader.
Did you take it?
Yes, well you didn't really have any choice, you know. So.
How many tours did you serve?
Tours, 1. And every time I meet a vet, which I often do if I'm wearing my Marine cap, I had one from Iraq, and he said, oh, you guys had it a lot tougher than I did, and I have to challenge him. I said, no, if we could live a year over there, we knew we were coming home. You poor guys had to go back. And that's the truth. That's what's so unfair. What, 1% serve in the military? 1%. And I lost that platoon leader first time I saw action. And he wasn't killed, but he was knocked out, kind of shot right through here. And I looked up at him hit and realized, oh my gosh, I'm in charge now. That was a wake-up thing. My friend Jumpy, we called him then, from Wichita, was just a few feet from me. And we'd been sent on a patrol. The day before, a hill had been taken by another company. And then we went through them and proceeded the push. Anyway, we saw action with that. And we were ambushed. And that was a big learning experience. It was the last time I was online, and it was getting dark, and the platoon sergeant said, Van, I've got a job back in H&S Company as a supply sergeant. And he said, it's your job if you want it. And I was in a bunker, and it was getting dark. We weren't standing watch. I said, oh, I don't want to do that. And he said, you better think it over. And finally, I said, can I come up and just talk with you? And I did. And he said to me, you know, Van, there comes time in the military when you've got to look after number 1. And I didn't like that, but I did, and went back. So I got about a 2-month hitch of that. I saw the difference between the rear and the ones on the line. Anyway,
So when you came home, how was it like adjusting to, I go home, I have dinner at 5 o'clock? What was that?
well, it's hard to believe. The one thing that we had then, we came home on troop ships, and that, you know, you're on that ship, what, I forget how many days, but it seemed like forever. So there's a little readjustment, you know, to away from the line, and you had hot food and all that. Coming home, the worst thing coming home is you felt good, and you thought you might hear a few good words or questions. Korean War, no. And I don't tell this story very often. I played church baseball with a guy, Bob Kenny. He was going to KU at the time, and they won the national tournament. He also went to the Olympics. Bob was one of the nicest guys you could ever meet, a friend of mine. Everybody in town was talking about that. And I would get questions like, "Eel, I haven't seen you for a while." I said, "Well, I was in Korea." "Oh," end of conversation. So I tell the Vietnam guys, "We had it so much better than you. You got spat upon and treated horribly." When my brother came home, oh my gosh. First of all, he came in December, no suntans, and he came home with bleached hair from the South Pacific, and he had blonde, wavy hair. He was a handsome guy. He stole all the good looks. And anyway, walking down the street with him, I couldn't have had a more enjoyable life. And one of the teachers said, "Would you ask your brother, would he come and visit the school?" And I said, "Sure, I'll check with him." So that was something until the two of us tried to lead a cheer. And he didn't know it had been changed, and he jumped up earlier than I did, you know, and got all the chuckles.
Did you get to go on an honor flight?
Yes.
Tell me about
Yeah.
that.
That's the most humbling things. I wear a Marine cap ever since I've been there, because I found out all these other guys that would tell you just what I told you now, what it was like when you came home. It was like, so what, you know? And there is one, I will tell you one story. There was one lady who didn't do that to me. I had a good friend in high school, Bob Ressler was his name. I could go on and on about him, one of the brightest guys in the class. He was in the National Guard, did not have to go, but he got a chance to go to officer school in the Army, and he went over there. And he and I were over there at the same time. And I kept telling my folks, "Please let me know what outfit Bob is. I might be able to run him down over here." They would never write. So finally I got a letter one day, Bob had been killed in action. And I got that news when I was in Korea. Anyway, when I went home, the toughest call I had to make was call on his parents. And I went over, and his dad was not there that day, he was working. His dad was so opposed to the Korean War, he had a lot of anger. But his mom was there. And I sat down in her living room and expressed my concern about Bob. And she said to me, "E.L., it is so good to see you sitting there." And I thought, holy cow, she loses a son, and I get treated with respect like that. War is unfair. Unfair.
You had an Uncle Bud that served in World War II?
Yes.
Tell me about him.
Well, when he came home and he'd been through 4 campaigns, yeah, I'll tell you a side. I learned how to pray while he was gone. He and I argued all the time and had fights. And it was getting close to the wartime, and one time I said to him in anger, "I'll be happy as hell when you have to go to the service." So what happened to him? He had to go to the service. And I wrote him letters, we got letters back. And I'll tell you, I never went to bed at night without begging God to bring him home. So when he came in that night, after not seeing him for 2.5 years, we heard the feet hit the front door. And the rest of us were just like automatic. We were at that door almost immediately at about 2 o'clock in the morning. It was the most joyful day, joyful Christmas. and I got to go around with him, quite a bit. Here's my brother with a suntan and bleached hair. And he met a gal that was his wife-to-be, who was 2 years ahead of me in school. There's such a difference. They do. Okay, I do. I've been approved for some PTSD. I couldn't understand what some things were. Well, this is September. This is the first time I saw action. This month has always been a reminder. Right now, about the 9th of this month, I know I saw bullets come so close to my head that I should have been killed in the dirt as I was on the deck. And some of those things will come back. But you were kind of expected to just kind of shrug it and go on. People weren't interested. So, but the unfairness of it. My friend Jumpy, I call him John now, but it was Jumpy.
The guy from Wichita?
Yes. Yeah, and that poor guy, he got stranded they had a 4-person outpost at night. They got surrounded by the, I don't think they were Chinese, and I think they were North Koreans. He got stranded there out that night. One of those 4 got captured that night. And John told me, he said, I just stayed down. I thought when it gets daylight, I'm going to shag and hope to get back in line. And he said, I look up and here's a guy coming to me. And he said, I got him right here. I saw my bullet hit his head just like that. And I thought I used to get a question once in a while, did you ever kill anybody? And my answer, honestly, I don't know. I saw where shots were coming from out of camouflage, gunfire. I shot at those. I don't know, and thank God I don't have that memory that he had, of that guy getting hit. The one guy got captured, and we had 2 types of dungaree pockets. One were side pockets that had slits in them that you could slide things in. The guys who captured him, the Koreans who captured him, searched him, and they missed a grenade that was in that pocket. So when they got him back through the lines, he figured they were going to shoot him. And they got in an argument. He doesn't know what they were arguing about, but they got separated from him. He managed to get that hand grenade out, pulled the pin, threw it in the middle of them, and ran like hell. He made it. He also got written up in the Leatherneck magazine. That story was made.
So what would you tell people that are coming back from Afghanistan right now?
Yeah.
What would you tell them?
Well, I'm always interested in talking to them. There's no question about it. My hat generates a lot of questions. You ask about the honor flight. When I went on that, and we all had that experience together, I thought, I'm gonna wear a cap from now on. I'm gonna wear a Marine cap. I never did that for all those years. And that cap, the reason I also get it, it gets me in all kinds of conversations. And except one thing I've noticed, if I wear a cap with the Korean War on it, I get less comments, and I wondered why. And I thought, wait a minute. There's a lot of people who don't even know there was a Korean War. They wouldn't know what that is, probably. Well, you make friends and you come home and you kind of lose track of each other. And some of those, they had this reunion of my company. It was years before I knew it. And that platoon leader that got hit that first combat I was in, it was just amazing to see him because I thought so much of him. And he stopped by in Colorado Springs. We lived there. He was on a motorcycle and spent a night with us. Couldn't keep him longer because he had certain stops he had to make, but he had to get that motorcycle ride over because he was going to lose his license. And it was his last motorcycle trip. He would have been in his 80s.
from the war. Tell us about you. You came back. Where are you living? Who are you living
Moved back home. Started taking advantage of mom and dad again. I did.
Why not?
I'm ashamed of it. And I decided to go to school. Worked at Boeing in the summertime in a training course they had. And then signed up for the St. John's College, was a Lutheran school. What I knew of Lutherans then, but they were what related to the Catholics, but we had to take classes in religion. And it was a religious experience, and it got me reading the Bible, and I'm thankful for that. And married the preacher's daughter.
Tell me about that.
You want my initial response?
I want your initial response. I want all the dirt.
Frankly, it was hell. 36 years. Honey, I'm not looking over at you yet. I'm just telling it like it is, okay. I had an idea as a salesman, you know what? If you can sell a product, you can sell somebody on loving you. Yeah, that never worked. It didn't work. He's in that case. Are you okay?
What was the atmosphere when you came back in the 50s? Was it dramatically different from when you left? Just how society was?
I think it was such a short time when it boiled down to it. And my girlfriend at that time, she didn't think I dressed right with the college students that were there. You really ought to get a blue jacket, you know, navy blue jacket to wear, you know, not some other clothes that I had in the closet. Okay.
What was the right way to dress? I guess blue.
Well, and you know, I don't know if we wore ties there, but certainly on the job, I wore a tie. Yeah, got back.
Had you purchased your first car yet by this point?
Yeah, I had. My dad had a 37 Pontiac that we had during World War II, 8-cylinder. And he traded that off when he could get a car in 1947. And he was given $200 for it. I said, Dad, I'd like to have it. He said, well, why did I get this? I paid for it, but that's how I got my first car. Yes. Stick shift.
Did you ever attend a protest?
Yeah, protest of the war we just ended down in Colorado Springs. And I can't find the picture in the newspaper that I had my picture taken, and with a young lady who was a really good speaker that day.
Were you wearing your Korean cap?
I had something, but I can't remember what cap you got. I got to find that picture. I think I ought to make a t-shirt out of it. I had children like a year and a half later. The first one, my son Todd.
And where was this?
And we were living in Winfield, Kansas, and that eventually we lived in Wichita and Hutchinson and Topeka eventually. He was my first. Year and a half later, my daughter Jill.
What was it like to become a father?
Oh, I wanted that badly. And we had neighbors down the street that we knew, and they had 4 kids. They used to stop by our house all the time. Well, you know, I think I changed jobs for one thing, because I had to work day collecting, night selling. And I took a job where it's mostly day work with Blue Cross Blue Shield. And that was a good move. When he was 17, 18, before we're living in Hutchinson, I was in our family room one night, and everybody else was in bed. My son came in the back door and he said, Dad, I need to tell you something. I said, what's going on, Todd? And he said, I'm gay. And I did the right thing, played it cool, although I thought I was going to blow my head off, I mean, on its own, to hear that. We had a talk, and he said, I'm going to ask you not to tell Mom. Not now. I said, well, that's got to be changed, but we'll talk about that later. But I said, Todd, let's get some help. And he said, I'll do anything you ask me to do. So the next day, because Blue Cross Blue Shield connection with physicians, I called a friend who knew all the physicians, and I said, I need the best psychologist I can get in this state. He said, you're living close to him. Hertzler Clinic, Halstead, Kansas. Go over and talk to him, made an appointment with him, went and visited with him, told him, how do we do this? How do we change him? And everything. And so then Todd went, and he interviewed Todd. Then I went back for the next interview. And I said, you got some advice for me how to do with this? He said, yeah. You can do two things. You can spend all kinds of thousands of dollars on deep psychoanalysis, and you're going to be right back where you're at right now. Your son is gay. And he said, by the way, he's one of the most intelligent young men I have ever talked to. I just love the visit we had with him. Well, so it's lump it and save it. Struggled with it. He went to the University of Kansas. I didn't find out till a few months ago. I knew he was involved in the gay rights movement there. I knew he was involved. I didn't know he was director of the involvement. It's in black and white. And I started listening, learning. And one night when he was at KU and he was in a dismal basement apartment when he was going to school, he got a phone call and I kept hearing, yeah. And I knew something was bad on the other line. And when he hung up the phone, I said, what was that about, Todd? He said, Dad, it's a threatening call. I get them all the time. That's my son. You ask about my protesting, he was a champion. He was that back, he wasn't a big jock coming out of the closet as they are today. And I'm glad they do. But that's my son. He had more guts and he was tougher than any man I knew. Because he wasn't big physique, he was tall, but that's it.
Is he still with us?
No, he died of cancer, it'd be 12 years ago. And they weren't doing colonoscopies in his time. And one thing led to another where they x-rayed some pain and what he thought were kidney stones. They slowed the bottom half of his lung and it was filled with cancer. That was the first clue. That was October and January. February he was gone. So I miss him.
He sounds like he was an
And he was stimulating. He could talk on subjects. He was smart as a dick. He was our intellect in the family, yeah. Now I got another son, he's got a master's in counseling. He too, but he's too, I don't want to downsize what he's got or my daughters, no. But that's my son.
Someone had a breech birth. Tell me about were the births.
My daughter
difficult?
Jill that you remember. We couldn't, in those days, the first one I could be in the delivery room. And boy, you appreciate a wife at a time like that. And that went fine. And the next time they made you leave the room, but there was a little door window and you could stand and look in that window. And the good Dr. Bearhorse that delivered them, every once in a while to give me a high sign because it was taking a long time. And he would just kind of assure me, it's okay. He was a guy who was slower than an ant. And then suddenly, my gosh, he moved like lightning. And she was breech and he got her out. That was my daughter Jill that I see some comparisons there.
When you get to see Todd again, and you will.
Yeah.
That's my belief. You
I
will.
believe.
It may not be looking at him like we are. What are you going to say to
Mine
him?
too. Well, I would say thank you. The pastor he had, she interviewed me before she had his funeral, and it was quite a funeral. And she said, "What was he to you?" And my first comeback was, "He's my teacher." I learned so much from him, and I did. I think I'll probably say thank you, Todd. Thanks for putting up with me. Listen, you know what I had planned for him? I heard Bob Feller's dad bought him a baseball and put it in his crib. I read that someplace. What do you think I did the first day? He was born on Sunday, and the next day I went to Western Auto and I got a baseball and took it home and put it in. I should have put the Book of Knowledge or something like that in there instead of a baseball, you know.
Did you have any pets when you were a
Yeah,
kid?
sure
Tell
did.
me about those.
The one I remember is Boots. Well, and when my brother left in June of 1942, our dog would sit on the porch by the screen door, so that you couldn't open that screen door without waking up the dog. And that dear dog would be there every night waiting for my brother to come home.
I don't know what this means, but do you remember the funny memory about Kirk and the overalls and ovaries?
Oh yes, sex education. Yeah, I did a lot of speaking at churches, got a lot of invitations, and special meetings and so forth. And we were going up in northern Kansas, and so I told Lois, or asked her if she wanted to ride along with me. And so he said, yeah. And then he was asking questions, but Lois determined it was time to teach him about the birds and the bees. And so, well, I hadn't practiced that a lot, so coming home after the speaking was all done, and I said, I need to share some things with you, Kirk. And Kirk was always an eager guy. He was a fun kid to raise. He just eagerly would do things. And so I thought, well, I'm going to do this clinically as best I can. So I started off and I said, well, now, first of all, let's begin with a woman's anatomy. They have things called ovaries, you know. Then I proceeded from there to go through to getting pregnant and that. And I thought I was, well, first of all, I said to Kirk, I need to teach you about some of the things about sex. And he said, Dad, I know all that. That was my son Kirk. I know of it. Oh gosh, he must have been, I don't know, 12, 13, something like that, I suppose. And maybe a little younger than that, but I know all that. But when I got through all of this business about the ovaries, I said, you know, Kirk, it helps me to know what you will remember from this. And why don't you play it back to me? Now we're riding in the car. And he said, well, first of all, women have these things called overalls. I thought, let's just change the subject and just try another time at another approach to this, overalls.
I'm not sure what this means, but when did you finally believe Todd and me about the woman in the closet?
That's interesting. We lived in a house in Wichita that had a Western bungalow, had a 2-story on the back end of a house. And there was a bedroom and a partial room and a bathroom on that flight. And my kids told me one time that they would wake up in the middle of the night and in the closet in their room there was this friendly lady that they saw. They will swear to it by this day. Now your question, how was your question you asked? That's what I know about her. And they will, I believe them. I don't know if it was a shadow in the closet or what. But it was of no threat. They said we weren't afraid of her, yeah.
What does it feel like to be the patriarch of your family?
I've had an awful good life. And I have a good life. The bad part of life right now, the worst part of it is losing people. I've had, in the last month, I've had 3 classmates in my class that died. And the last one, when I saw he died, I thought, holy cow, he was the most healthy guy in the world when I saw him last. And it's tough. It is.
All right, so what was your best, worst, or funniest moment at the New Year's Eve parties in Hutch?
In where?
Hutch?
Oh,
And what is
my
Hutch?
wife at that time, we kind of helped people get acquainted at church, and we threw a New Year's Eve party, good size. And close friends were there that we made. Some of them are gone now. But I don't remember, but the kids all came to the parties. They just stayed in a different part of the house. Sound familiar?
You had your own parties.
I grew up Methodist, okay? My testimony is the part of Jesus dying for my sins was never clear to me. That was a discovery, okay? Now I've changed a lot of thoughts since then, okay? But that was drilled into me in the church. As one great educator in the church told Sunday school teachers one time, he said, you have one question to ask of your kids, or ask of yourself. did they learn that Jesus Christ died for their sins? I would just love to go back to that time. And I would say, Dr. Hoffman, how about if we told Jesus loved them, that God loved us so much that he even went to the cross for us? Why don't we teach them that truth and not just driving you to horrible, miserable sinners? I think it creates a psychological problem in life. So in my heart's probably back in the Methodist again. When I married Lois, and I got elected treasurer at a voters meeting, and my father-in-law was the pastor. And at the kitchen afterwards, when his buddies were over there, they complimented him and said, "Hey, your son got elected treasurer today." And I had to ask him, "What does a treasurer do?" I found out.
You found out quick, didn't
Yes,
you?
I did.
So
Third
I
and
heard
fourth
you
grade.
gave a sermon about heaven, and you touched a lot of people. What do you think heaven is like right now?
I don't think, I believe in it. Now, really going out on them, I'm not ready to condemn anybody to hell. I think if it's going to be done, it has to be done by God. And all I need is somebody just to kind of be able to harmonize this a little bit. We love a God who gave us his son all the way to the cross for the world. Did he create people so they'd be in hell? And as soon as they can answer that with a reasonable explanation, I might entertain some of my old thoughts. But not today. Not today.
So in your whole life, tell me about your favorite job you had and your worst job you had.
Okay. I think the favorite job I had was with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas. I was with them for 23 years, 22 years, and got promotions. And one of them I was all on my own to travel 1/4 the state of Kansas and call on the larger businesses. I really loved that job. You could
seem
measure
like
your work.
You're good with people. You're good communicating.
Well, if I did, I owe my dad for that probably too, and mom. Oh, worst job of the day? My
your worst job.
my friend who worked for Penny's, and they were recruiting clerks. And he said, "Will you just come? You'll just try it for a Saturday. It's so much fun." I did that for a Saturday. I thought, this has got to be the worst job in the world. You're inside all day long. You couldn't go outside. I couldn't stand it. The jobs I had was out delivering chickens or going out picking up chickens.
You like the physical work.
Oh, yes. And outdoor, yes.
So was Blue Cross and Blue Shield the only place you worked at the time, or did you have?
I did the Prudential thing following in my dad's footsteps. Went with Blue Cross Blue Shield. Took a flyer on a company. It was not mobile housing, but stick-built housing in a factory. Picked the wrong time. I didn't realize they were in financial trouble at the time, and I made a big mistake. Okay. And eventually then a friend I knew was with Blue Cross Blue Shield of Kansas City and called me up and offered a job. And I would tell anybody, I think I'm a good enough musician to know a really good one when I hear one. And she's it. She does things that I could just dream of.
What kind of music does she play? Like Frank Sinatra type stuff?
Yes,
or classical?
yeah,
or what?
it is, most of it. She was playing the piano at Fort Lowry years ago, and she does all, no music in front of her. They will name songs. She'll take off on it and say, "Is this it?" And not quite it, and just put the piano more, and then she'll latch onto it where she goes. And
What songs do you like to hear her play?
Yeah, it would be Cole Porter stuff, Gershwin's, of course. Oh man, I can't see his name now. He's dead, and this is a shame. Trailers for Sale or Rent.
Roger Miller.
That's it. Yes. Oh, by the way, I think I like all of it today. There was a time when I was really a snob, along with my peers. You know, when they came along with rock and roll, we thought that was about the depths of hell, for sure. and also the Beatles. When they came out and I heard they were great musicians, I looked at their long hair and didn't listen to their music. And they wrote good stuff.
And do you play the piano?
Yes.
What do you like to play?
I got 500 and some songs in there that I love. Oh gosh, that's so broad that I don't know where to begin. You know what I'm most happy about? Is the way he plays the piano.
Oh my goodness.
You didn't know
Well, I
that.
learned it from him,
You
so-
didn't know that. He did it sneakingly. You know how he was living with us, and I heard him playing the good stuff back in his room over the net. We had the piano at home, 2 of them, and the electric one with the headset. So what I did every night before I went to bed, I'd put the music in on the bench of that piano in a certain place. I knew just exactly where it was. Next morning, I'd wake up and take a look, and it'd be maybe moved around a little bit. He was sneaking in there practicing. And I
From the
but
time you
maybe-
were a little kid to now, how has your musical taste changed, or has it changed?
Well, I still love the old things. When I look at when it was written, and it said, well, Stardust was written in 1929. That's the year of our birth. You know, we weren't hearing the world out much until we were a little two and a half. And I see those songs, and I think, why do I have such a good feeling? Well, there's the old radio going. My mom was playing the radio. I got to tell you one to add to this, though. When you're gutting chickens, like I did for 8 years, okay, we had a radio up on the shelf because it had to be plugged in to an electric socket. And around all that water, you don't want to get that radio wet. So I'd be back there working, and for 2 hours, RCA Records put on a 2-hour radio program of the classics. And that's when I learned to love that music.
So when you hear the classics now, do you think of gutting chickens?
Well, I have to admit that's where I really got it, but I love listening. It's a lot prettier listening than it is gutting that chicken.
Tell me about when you became a grandpa. What was that like?
Exciting. As I said, I went down and bought a baseball and put it in his crib.
When you got to hold him for the first time, what was that like?
I love kids. I had nieces and nephews that I dearly loved. New parents. Oh my gosh. That's where I'd like to go back and wipe the slate clean and say, don't do that stupid thing like that again.
But you learn. That's part of the learning process.
At their expense, though. See, that's the problem.
But
The first time I saw her, the first time I saw her, she was going to college where I was. There was a big restaurant that on Sunday nights after we'd been to the movie, we all went there for pie or something. And I was with my buddies in there in the booth, about 5 of us in that booth. And we looked at the front door, and here was this young lady, this blonde. She was going to the door, but she came back in, and she was John with some kids. And she was a knockout. And I just said to my buddies, who in the hell is that? And my Fred said, that's Babe Newton. She goes to St. John's College. He lived up next to the college.
she was the ideal Johnny girl.
That's exactly right.
You said that's what I want.
Yeah. And, she had movie star looks.
So when you first talked to her.
Oh,
what
first
did she
talked to her
say?
was in Florida. And first wife and I went down there for a trip. And she was working on the ironing board or something. And we just carried on a simple conversation with each other. And it was nice. And my kids all loved her.
And how did you decide you wanted to get married?
I was ready. I'd been divorced for 7 years. Okay.
So did you bring it up or did she bring it up?
Well, I'd thought it up for sure. And she is a dream. And she's got noticeable guys in this old place here. It's really interesting. I just love it. When one guy in particular, forget the cameras. I go, no. Here, and he pays her special attention. I mean, you can go to the table and visit with somebody, do that, but he kind of likes to lean over to her. Well, his wife is a former musician, kind of theatrical, and she hasn't really grown out of that. She says when she was a little girl, 5, she did ballet. She first, I said, how'd you get into the business? When I was 5, my mother made this special costume for me, and the crowd just applauded and applauded. And of course, between you and me, I want to ask her, but it won't. Did it take you ever and ever to grow out of that stage, or are you still 5? Well, that's her, and it's a little. You're going to protect this with my life, I hope. Well, anyway, I know what's going on. He pays her special attention, and he just, I think, galls her. Last night we went down there to eat. Babe greeted her. She didn't even greet her. She didn't even say hi to you last night. She's never realized her beauty, never. I tell her time and time again, and she'll find some flaw that just doesn't make that true, and that's another why she's.
You're talking about me?
I sure am. Why, you're a wonderful woman. We got invited to this couple, and they came later, and they were complaining, but she was complaining, well, everybody comes here to die. And, well, that's about half truth. That's the future. Anyway, we get a knock at the door, and she's there one night, and her husband's hiding around the corner. And she says, can you come out and have a glass of wine at 6:30 or something like that night? I said, well, yeah, we can. And so we got invited up. And she's Scottish, so am I. I'm half Scottish. I was so thrilled to think, oh my gosh, I got to meet them, got to talk to her. It's not proven out to be a very good thing. And now they will invite people up to the room. They've got their pictures. They've got some videos at the show when she was performing. And it just says she was good, okay, but that's the invitation to the room. And she does that with everybody in the place.
So when you two got married, where did you move to? Where did you live?
Well, we moved in where she lived, and I still have my place in Topeka. And then we talked about buying a house and shopping around. We would look for different places, and I was working for the church then, and I'd worked with the church down there, Family of Christ, and had dinner with them, or lunch, and we went, and I looked at the surroundings, and I just fell in love with it. So I said,
And where was this?
in Colorado Springs, but the very north end of the town. And so I said, we all go down there and look. And we looked at some open houses, fell in love with it. We thought it was kind of a nice way to get introduced. We were within family range, but.
Did you guys just know each other so well already by that point?
Well, we did know, and this is my kids. My one daughter said, I used to wish that my mom were, and babe, that's how they were affected by her. And it was unbelievable. A real love. And you've been in a non-lovable marriage for that. And you can't buy that, and you can't sell it. You can't sell happiness. Boy, did we have it.
So how long
And
did
I
you
can't
guys live
believe
in
it yet.
Colorado Springs?
2 years, I guess.
Where did you go then?
2000 to about. Then we moved to Windsor Gardens,
Where's that?
East Denver, just a short distance from here. There are 4-story buildings, and I thought we should move closer. My kids were all scattered. My 3 living kids were all scattered, and I thought we ought to be closer to hers. And so we started looking in Denver, and she grew up here, so this is home to her. And with the marriage, ain't nothing like it. I started playing the piano for the first time, and I started growing, playing the piano, and do things that sometimes I can't believe. You know, musicians have different traits. Some of them could be improved upon, okay? Some of them can be improved upon. And they become judgmental about others. My kids, my daughter told me one time, we get angry with mom, we were out eating, they were down in Austin. Here's a guy playing the guitar one night, and you know, he was doing okay, but it wasn't top. And of course, mom serves as the critic in all of this. And no critic, but feeling free, encouraged by her.
So when you two got married, what were some, you had to have faced hard times or challenges. What were some of the challenges you faced when you two got married?
Well, you know, they're not just jumping out at me. The one, unfortunately, the one negative one was my former wife. She felt like this was borders on, I won't even say the word. That was tough. I think it put a lot of pressure on my kids. And mom was their mom was very upset, even though I'd been single for 7 years, yeah. But the difference, you see, I had, as I knew with her, I didn't have to be finding excuses for her.
You could be you.
You know, because the other mother had a sharp tongue, rather unmerciful at times. And it's unfortunate for her, yeah.
So what did you two do for fun? Did you travel? Did you go on cruises? What did you do for fun?
No cruises, travel. We went to DC, took some southern states in, made a trip to Florida, made a trip to California, Sacramento a few times. The last was when my son was dying with cancer. We've covered a lot of ground, haven't we? We left DC, we had a certain schedule time to get back. We left DC, had not made a motel reservation ahead on the way back, and I just kept dreaming in the back of my mind, I wish we could find a place where they had a jazz trio playing tonight. That would just be perfect. In blindness, we were running out of lights, so picked a motel along the way. Got in there, and lo and behold, it was a Friday night, and the guys were playing the best jazz. And the guy played two trumpets at one time. He'd been on Johnny Carson's show. And we're sitting here by that. And I thought, oh my gosh, it was just like somebody dropped a big gift in your lap.
What's the one thing that you wish you could have done that you didn't?
Well, there's a lot of parenting things I would have done differently. That's one thing. I suppose if I'm honest, growing up and seeing movies all the time, acting,
You would have been good.
and I had a teacher that believed in me a lot, but I didn't pursue it.
What was the most profound experience that you've been through in life?
Oh boy, they've
Or
been
most life-changing moment?
yeah. Oh boy, there could be a lot there.
Yeah, these are the fun questions.
Yeah. Okay. Honey, I can't tell them. I can't tell them.
We'll leave it at that. We'll leave it at that.
Okay.
We'll leave that there. All right. In your lifetime, what was the most amazing invention that came along that you were like, wow, that's pretty cool?
Oh, wow. I'll tell you a good one that came along, anesthesia in the dentist's office. You used to go to the dentist's office and they pulled teeth and drilled on them without anything to relieve your pain. So that was a big one. Oh gosh, we've seen so many. The space shots, the moon shot, seeing that live.
Who had the greatest influence on your life? You've told me about a lot.
Well, I think character-wise, my dad. And then read helpful traits about getting along with crowds or groups and that sort of thing. He was a good leader there.
you remember growing up?
Oh, zoot suits. 1940s, zoot suits.
Why were those weird to you?
Oh, they were just, first of all, it was the war was going on, and they were shortening clothes. They were trying to save things, and the zoot suiters came out with these baggy pants and long legs and tight, and all this extra clothing, and they looked weird. They thought, okay.
Who has been the best president of the United States and who's been the worst?
Franklin Delano Roosevelt. He gave us hope. The Depression was going on, and we saw all this. I had 3 uncles that joined one of the work programs, and those work programs, the guys would earn so much money, and so much had to be sent home to their parents. And my grandma and grandpa got help from that too.
What did you admire the most about your parents?
Well, first of all, you know what? They were from different backgrounds. My mom was a coal miner's daughter. Dad was from a wealthy family, a wealthy dad. And by the way, if I didn't tell you, it's that wealthy dad of his that connected him with Mom. She worked for them at the house. She was a house worker, helping Mom in the kitchen. And so they brought 2 dimensions. And she was probably far ahead when it came to prejudice. I didn't hear Dad jump on the bandwagon so much of equal rights and all of that. He was a Democrat. But I remember my mom talking about, she made a trip to Bartlesville, Oklahoma. She was coming home on the bus. They stopped at Coffeyville, a southern town, for lunch. And the bus driver got off and said, the white people can go inside now. And my mom said, I heard that, and she said, I'll be darned if I will go in there with that group of people and leave the black people on the bus. She had certain gifts that she had to be kind of quiet about, maybe.
What is the greatest advantage to growing old?
I think maybe appreciation, growing in appreciation. You learn more about the simple things, like we got right now. When I was a kid growing up, I couldn't have spent a night at the house. It was the worst thing in the world. I wanted to be downtown where the kids were. And Saturday night was a fantastic night to be down there. And the parents were all down there. All the cars were parked. All of them were walking the streets, visiting with each other. And I dream of that. And you know what? I just led myself up a road that I forget where the fork in the road came. You were asking me again, basically, about being old. It's easier to talk about the sad part. The sad part is losing friends. And I never appreciated that when my mom lost all of hers after my dad. Well, first of all, we're appreciative because we did see Depression days, and we can't believe what we have today. But we also know that there are a lot of people who don't have that.
If you could go back to you at any age, what age would you go back to, and what would you tell yourself? 12, 13, 14?
Okay, yeah, I think 14, 15. I got elected as student body president in junior high. I enjoyed that. I enjoyed plays at school.
But what would you tell yourself? What advice would you give?
Oh, advice? Oh, I know what it would be. Accept that things are going to change and not be as you were. I had learned that produce business very well enough to Dad backed us that we bought a competitor out. I was the guy that knew the business, and I thought it was going to last forever. And I said, someday, Bud, we're going to have a chain of these. Well, if we had a chain of them now, there'd be 0. What I didn't learn is things are not going to be the same. Businesses change. And that was an expensive lesson. Really was.
What advice would you give grandkids, great-grandkids, great-great-grandkids?
I think learn the joy of learning about other people. I trained all my kids. I said, you want to make friends? Ask them questions. Learn about them. And I think we did a pretty good job of that. We need that. I'm hearing the word empathy today, and I want to say hallelujah. Because I one time didn't know what empathy really meant until it was taught in a spatial class one time.
What advice do you give your grandkids and kids that are starting families for the first time? They're raising young kids in today's environment. What advice would you give them?
Oh, I think that first of all, I would say ease up. Forget what you think they ought to turn into be, but ease up. I'd like to tell every young man, there's an old joke, but I won't tell you the joke. I tell him, for crying out loud, what seems so enjoyable to you may not be enjoyable for your partner. Will you just take time to find out what enjoyment she has out of something, and then do it, and not deceive yourself because it's so damn much fun to me. That's the sex education I would give every one of them.
What do you want people to, after you've gone on, you've reconnected with Todd, you're gone, what do you want people saying about you?
Well, I hope he's a decent man. Yeah, I do. Yeah. Just be a decent man. And my dad, see, I appreciate him so much more after he was dead.
What do you have to say?
Oh my
to them?
gosh, what I wonder about families, what are you going to think about this when you see it? And I hope it stimulates some curiosity in you. And you might want to go back and have me elaborate on a few things. Like I'd like to tell you that joke I told you about. I'll tell you that in private. And hopefully, I hope you appreciate your mom and your grandma, and I hope your Aunt Babe, you really appreciate what a gem she is. Because I'm telling you, I'm the luckiest guy in the world. The luckiest guy in the world. That's the best I can do. And I can't do any better than what I got. Okay. Love you very much.